One thing that has really impressed me so far in the lead up to Wu Chang Fallen Feathers is the awesome enemy types and the amount of boss variety that the game seems to have. To me, that is the key to any great Souls-like, and it looks like they've nailed that from what we've seen so far in the trailers and all of the gameplay showcases for Wu Chang Fallen Feathers. Now, while the setting of the game itself is based in reality, set in 17th century China during the late Ming Dynasty, it's pretty obvious that the setting for the game outside of the literal time frame and the location is obviously not realistic. There's something in this game called the feathering disease that causes its victims to slowly transform into essentially bird-like creatures, and over time they will eventually become insane as well. Now, this has led to some insane supernatural sort of enemy types that clearly do not fit the real-life setting of the game, and the devs have essentially said that this game is realistically an alternate reality of 17th century China. That gives us a bit of an idea as to what we can expect in this game. This isn't the type of game where everyone is going to be a realistic enemy type and stuff like that. There are going to be some absolutely absurd bosses in this game, and that's something that I always love to see, especially in Souls-likes. And as you'll see throughout this video, a lot of these bosses and just even the regular enemy types are some pretty absurd creations. Now, there will be some regular human enemies that we come across, no doubt, but a lot of the regular enemy types that we've seen are essentially twisted or like supernaturally deformed humans that have turned into something beyond that. We've seen mutated villagers with hunched backs and feathered limbs. We've seen monks with crazy headpieces or tattoos. And a lot of these regular enemy types seem to fight very differently than each other as well, which is always good. There is, in my opinion, too many Souls-likes out there where the regular enemies, not so much the bosses, but just the regular enemies you come across, they're all kind of the same as each other. And it's great to see that that is hopefully not going to be the case in this game. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that the feathering works in phases as well. And so some of these enemies that we come across will be maybe in the early stages of the feathering, where some will be in later stages, and that will even make the same sort of enemy types potentially different from each other as well, especially as we get further into the game. Now, something else that's really cool is that the feathering has a large impact on the enemy motives within this game. So a lot of the enemy factions, for example, will chase Wu Chang and essentially try to hunt her down, because those factions are essentially hunters of those who have the feathering in order to try and rid it from the world. While on the flip side as well, there are going to be some enemies who also have the feathering, and it will be those infected enemies fighting against us who will also be infected with the feathering. And so a lot of the different motives between these characters is going to be really different, and that seems like it's going to play a pretty massive part in most characters' goals within the game. Now, before we get into some of the bosses that are showcased throughout the trailers, if you guys are interested in more Wu Chang Fallen Feathers content, then be sure to hit that subscribe button. There is plenty more on the way, so make sure you don't miss out. Now, like I said, while the regular enemy variety does seem pretty solid so far, the boss variety, in my opinion, looks even better, because we see so many different types of enemies in the trailers and all of the gameplay released so far that it feels like we're kind of never going to get bored. It doesn't look like any of these bosses are even remotely similar to each other. They all look completely different. Even the bosses who are almost a similar type to another boss, in terms of, for example, maybe there's two different like bug type bosses, even those bosses seem very different from each other. Even just taking a look at a small snippet from the official trailer, you can see that it showcases everything from disfigured wizards to flying archer-like characters to massive bug-like creatures in the depths of cave systems, and essentially everything in between. It seems like no sort of archetype is off limits here. Some of these are based on human-like enemies, some of them are based on more animal-type creatures, and some of them are even based purely on essentially mythology, which generally makes for a great boss. There are even then some enemies that are more sort of human-like, but they're absolutely huge in their stature, and then there are some of these bosses that straight up, like I said, look like mythical demonic creatures that I can hardly even explain what they are. So even just in that one trailer that I've just shared there, the official trailer, you can see all of the difference between all of those bosses, and that is literally a 1 minute and 30-second trailer. So over the course of the entire game, I can only imagine how many different bosses there are going to be. Now, the official gameplay trailer then shows even more variety too, and I'm not going to run through every single boss, not only because it's obviously very tedious to just go through every single boss we've seen so far, but also for spoiler reasons, I want to leave some of this for you guys to find in game. but it definitely looks like each and every boss in this game is going to be insanely different from the last one. And to me, that is such a crucial part of any game like this. Now, this is obviously a very different type of game, so bear with me. But I've actually just replayed through Ghost of Tsushima, as I'm making a video on my sort of retrospective channel. Be sure to go and check that out if you guys are interested in more long form content on video games. But as I was playing through that game, as much as I absolutely love Ghost of Tsushima, don't get me wrong, pretty much all of the boss fights are essentially identical. And so that was one area that I felt a little bit disappointed in that game. And it was another reminder to me that that is such a crucial part, at least to me, maybe not to everyone, but to me, I really love it when each and every boss is different from each other, because one, it makes them more memorable, but two, it also just stops us from getting bored. If you're fighting the same bosses over and over, that is not really that fun in my opinion. Overall, the boss variety and just the broad amounts of enemy types in general is probably my biggest draw towards this game so far, outside of the awesome setting. So I'm very, very keen for Wu Chang Fallen Feathers. And I really do think this could be a very special Souls-like, provided it obviously launches in a good state and it's nice and stable and everything. But if it comes down to just the gameplay and everything we've seen so far looks really, really good in my opinion. Now, I'd love it if you guys could leave a comment below and leave a timestamp with which boss in all of the gameplay that I've shown looks the most exciting to you. I'm keen to see what type of bosses you guys are the most interested in, so be sure to comment that down below. And like I said, if you guys are new to the channel and you are interested in more Wu Chang content, be sure to hit that subscribe button. There is so much more on the way, both in the lead up to launch, and then there is going to be plenty more after launch too, plenty of guides and stuff like that. So make sure you don't miss out. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.